What is going on, y'all? KMBest here. Let's take a look at the best decks to climb in Marvel Snap. I've spent so much time talking about how I'm not gonna fall for Victoria Hand again, but here we are, and I have fallen for Victoria Hand again. This is a list that has consisted of half of my net cubes post-infinite. It has been an unbelievably successful deck for me this season, and I think a lot of that is due to how the meta has taken shape after the nerfs to TOV. The biggest thing that has changed is that we've gone from a metagame that was kind of rotating around 3 decks to a metagame that is a lot more open. There was a clearly defined hierarchy, and now that hierarchy is much more diffuse. In One Piece terms, Victoria Hand is Whitebeard, ruling in front of the throne rather than ever actually taking it, in a world where power is spread across a wide variety of different powerful contenders. She is, in a word, first among equals, even though that's more than one word. Victoria Hand is a powerful points package with good enough interaction, and right now, that's really all she needs to be. The metagame has been significantly depowered. The decks that were going over the top of this and had more interaction no longer particularly exist, and so you end up with decks like Victoria Hand and Phantom X that were 3rd and 4th placers becoming 1st and 2nd placers in this new metagame. Phantom X is an incredibly safe and powerful choice. One of the easiest decisions to make in Marvel Snap is I'm going to play Phantom X and do pretty well with it. This is a list that has some complexity built into it. There are ordering issues with Phantom X and figuring out exactly when you want to blow stuff up, and sometimes it can clunk. But the baseline here is there are 3 very relevant tech cards: Mobius, Shadow King, and Killmonger. And of course, a very powerful point package that may be a little finicky, but the numbers that you're getting for the output are actually kind of incredible. It's easy to look at this and see an underpowered point package because it is a fair point package. It's not really comboing or anything, but if you look at it in the context of other mid-range decks, the ratio of energy expended to points received is actually quite incredible in Phantom X lists. And that is the secret sauce here. It's a deck with a great ratio of energy to point output and the ability to run tech cards because it has that great ratio of energy to point output. I don't think the techno-organic virus decks have reached their final form. Every time I play one, I feel like there's still growth to be found in the space. Last week, I felt like this was a deck that had sort of capped out, but this week, I think, by virtue of having not made many card changes, it's possible other decks have caught up, and this deck needs to put in some work to go past it. This is still a strong list, don't get me wrong, but the amount of other people that are playing Mobius now, I think, has increased just a little bit. And of course, the amount of people doing a bunch of Gambit and Killmonger stuff, you're not particularly great into that stuff either. Fundamentally, this is a deck that is similar in scope and space to Victoria Hand, but a lot more of it is on the board, and that comes with upsides and downsides. I've noticed that when I play Victoria Hand, people are a lot more willing to stay into situations that they think they might be winning because a lot more of my power is located in my hand. Whereas this deck is very much playing straightforwardly on the board. You're not really catching people off guard with your power, you're displaying your power throughout the course of the entire game. And that makes it a little bit harder to juice cubes with this list, even though I do think it is a very powerful list in terms of just the output it can create. Captain Carter combo decks have become a very known factor in this metagame, and it's pretty easy to see why. This is the deck that has the biggest overall point output in the game most of the time, and you know, sometimes a good Mr. Negative draw is better, sometimes it honestly is not. This is a very high ceiling deck that requires a decent amount of forethought, and it's pretty difficult to make sure you're getting all of the output in every game. It's also a little bit clunky. I've gone back and forth on Galactus versus Nightcrawler versus, of course, the ever-present 12th card Silver Surfer. But I think largely the space I've ended up with is this one. Galactus, I think, was a lot better when you were seeing a bunch of mirrors. Galactus is very good in mirrors. at beating other people playing this, but I've been seeing a lot less of that recently. And I've decided that what I want to do is just go for the most consistent level of point output that I can acquire. And that is this configuration of the Captain Carter combo deck. This is a deck that can do points better than nearly anyone else in the game. It is extremely powerful, but as usual, it has some pretty clear weaknesses. The Juggernaut that exists in the common TOV decks, and of course the Shadow King that I've seen people replacing Mobius with, and I've even seen people suggesting replacing Copycat in the TOV decks with Shadow King. Shadow King is amazing against this list, and even if you weren't playing Shadow King for this list, you'd be playing it for all the people messing around with Venus still, and it's just generally a deck that is very yes or no oriented here. This is a deck that is either gonna combo over the top of you or gonna get tech carded. In the context of baseball here, it's a 3 true outcomes hitter. Either a walk, a strikeout, or a home run. And that is a lot of how this deck feels like. The home run is when you combo off and no one stops you. The walk is when you kind of combo off and play a little bit of a mid-range game and still win. The strikeout is whenever someone interacts with you. That's bad. This is an utterly terrifying deck to play against. I think the multiple man deck is just a really powerful list right now because it has proactive ways to answer the things that typically are meant to answer combo decks, and it does combo output very well. But it is a deck that doesn't necessarily go as tall as some other combo decks. It's just the deck that can consistently access relatively combo-esque point outputs on occasion. But it's not doing, you know, the Silver Surfer, Captain Carter kind of numbers. When those decks come together, they're getting sometimes into the triple digits. This deck is never getting into the triple digits. The platonic ideal of this deck is you have like 10 multiple men across the board, ranging from 9 to 14 power. That's kind of the thing you're doing. And that's awesome, but it's not fully going to be able to guarantee you beat everything. There are locations that can mess with you. It's definitely the kind of thing where this is the deck that's going to rely not just on its own draws, but on your execution very, very heavily. But I do think it's one of the most well-balanced decks in Marvel Snap right now. You can kind of do anything and play any role in any matchup, whether you want to be the deck going tall using your disruption to prevent their disruption from happening, or the deck going a little bit under but winning with your disruption. It can play the roles that it needs to play in most matchups across the board. Supergiant is, and probably will remain for an extended period of time, just a fundamentally powerful and strong list. This is a deck that is built on using its tech pieces to drag your opponent down to your level and prevent them from comboing off in meaningful ways, and then also on having just the best point output cards in the entire game. The Debris package, Wilson Fisk. These are extremely powerful, good rate cards that you pair with Supergiant, Negasonic, Cosmo, and Shadow King to prevent your opponent from being able to play any other game plan than a super powerful rate game plan. That is the fundamental premise here. You're going to have the best rate cards, and you're going to do everything you can to make the game about who has the best rate cards. Supergiant has been doing this for years, and she will continue to do it. The Lady Bullseye deck is a very solid inclusion here. Yes, you do get got by Mobius, but as we've seen from many of the other lists on this list, I suppose, it's fine. You're allowed to get got by Mobius. Like, you can just say, all right, I'm going to lose those, and then I'm going to be really good against everything that isn't doing that right now. There just isn't enough of a formed metagame for people to feel confident about all the tech cards they're choosing. All the lists I've talked about, like, they have a Mobius in them, but if you told me I want to play a Shadow King instead of a Mobius for most of those lists, it would be like, yeah, okay, that makes sense to me. You're allowed to do that, right? Because this metagame is still unformed, a little bit unfulfilled, it's just open, and that has, I don't think I've ever seen a metagame remain in like week 1 state for as long as this one has. It's been a lot of things you can just do. It doesn't feel very defined right now. What is tier 1? What is tier 2? The boundaries are very blurred. There isn't a lot of specific ability to target a tech deck at other stuff because the other stuff is such a wide range of stuff that you might not pick the right tech cards. And this is a deck that benefits very heavily from that, where it's just like, okay, well, if we're just playing like fair Marvel Snap, where both of us are going to win or lose based on where we allocate our points, I'm going to try to win by backloading that decision. I'm going to say I'm allocating all my points on the final turn of the game, so I'm just going to do that more efficiently than you. Not only is my stuff going to be cheaper, almost free, it's also going to be my choice as to where it goes. You might have made some suboptimal choices because you were playing it turn over turn. But me, all of my choices about point allocation happen on the final turn of the game, which means I have more information to work with because you might have 3 location spots, 3 spots filled at a location, and I have none. So I have a much better idea of what you can do, and you have no idea what I can do. And that is just going to be pretty good in metagames like this. I see a colossal amount of Venus decks, whether they be this list or the zombies list, and they're all like fine. I think that fundamentally, in as much as I have any issues with Venus decks, largely it is related to the fact that they are doing good point output, but not the best point output. And they typically don't have good interaction because they're not really able to play Shadow King. And especially in the zombie stuff, they definitely can't play Mobius. That's why the Venus deck I'm highlighting here is the one that has at least one interaction piece, that being Shang-Chi. This list is a list I refer to as 2024. This is just a deck from 2024. We're doing 2024 stuff, but Venus is here, so our 2024 stuff has actual power now. Really, really straightforward, really strong, genuinely interesting stuff happening here in the context of Venus, but I do think that it is ultimately just a little bit too fair to succeed long term, but it is, to my mind, significantly outkicking the coverage of Venus. This is the Venus deck that I think is the best. It's the Venus deck that's the most scary to me. I'm not necessarily sure I'd say you need to go get Submariner for it. I have some pretty severe doubts as to whether or not you need to go buy Submariner. I would guess that you do not. But I do think that what this deck is doing is just something that is good enough at this point in a metagame that is this unfocused to do reasonable point output that has at least a nod to interacting with your opponent, right? Because the biggest things that get this deck sad are decks that go over the top of it. And a lot of those decks actually will have a Shang-Chi target. Not all of them, but enough of them, right? And I think that that kind of thing, making sure you have space in the list for you to play tech, making sure you have the ability to take the people that are going over the top of you and drag them down a little bit. That's the thing that these lists have largely lacked. They've just been 12 engine cards, and the more they get refined and the more we figure out what you need to do in here and what you don't need to do in here, the more they'll be able to adapt to metagames and say, hey, deck is going over the top of me. What if I played a tech card that was good into that matchup? And I think that's the direction this stuff is going. If you want just a safe, strong list to play, Aurora is going to be that list. This is probably the easiest good deck to play in Marvel Snap, and it's a little bit deceptive, right? Because you do have to think about what you want to be doing and where you want to be placing your cards to make sure you get maximum output on your Aurora, and all of that is true, right? You do have to think about that stuff, but mostly what you don't have to think about is your game plan game to game. And this is a deck that has a very fair and very straightforward game plan that both players are probably going to understand the deal. And that's not necessarily the greatest spot to be in, but it's also a really easy game plan to understand. You play a bunch of cards and you play a card that makes all those cards a lot bigger. That is a real advantage for a deck like this. And I think that Aurora is a respectable and powerful deck that does some reasonably respectable and powerful things, and with the addition of Venus, is doing those things at a much higher level. I'm still not necessarily all there on ongoing. Like, part of me thinks maybe instead of Iron Lad, I should just be playing Mother Askani and seeing how that goes, and part of me thinks maybe I should jam a Mobius in here and see how that goes, but largely, I just think that ongoing is a strong, solid list that has been pretty consistently underrated over the past few months, that is just traditionally going to be decent enough at doing points in metagames that are open like this. I think there's a lot to be said for being a deck that can play both roles. We talked about this when we talked about the multiple roles that the combo multiple man and Juggernaut deck could play. This is a deck that plays multiple roles a little bit differently. It's a deck that can go combo with multiple Iron Men, or it's a deck that can play mid-rangey and go small in matchups where you're worried about exposing yourself to things that would beat your full combo line. And that kind of flexibility is valuable as well. We talked a little bit about Little Green. Let's talk about Big Green. This is a multiple man combo list that is much more devoted to the idea of being a combo deck. You live and die based on the interactions between your cards, whether that be blowing up your multiple man to revive it with Phoenix Force or using a Penny Parker Spider on your multiple man. There are multiple ways to get multiple moving multiple men in the course of this list. This is also a list that has even bigger cards in it. You have, of course, the Symbiote Spider-Man, which can also merge with a multiple man if you need it to do that. And at the top end, Heimdall to double the amount of multiple men you have on your board some of the time, and Eliath to shut down opposing interaction. This is a powerful list that does some really solid points right now, and there's just a lot to be said for being a good point output list that is most of the time going to be bigger than the stuff you're playing against. Speaking of being bigger than the stuff you're playing against, Zombie Galacti is a really powerful card if you can make it work. The biggest issue that the Zombie Galacti deck has is that it's not all that easy to make it work. One of the best things this deck has going for it, though, is Magic. We are in a metagame where Magic is particularly good because we have a lot of tempo decks that are based around maybe not entirely filling the board, but coming pretty close to filling the board by turn 6, which means their natural curves do not benefit from getting that extra turn a lot of the time, whereas your deck, as a deck that is built around a 7-cost card, naturally does. A lot of the time when I'm playing against this card for this deck, what I'm thinking is, please don't magic me on 5, please don't magic me on 5, please don't magic me on 5, which I think should be a lesson to anyone who wants to pick this deck up. You should be magicking on 5 a lot. It's a very powerful play to delay the fact that there will be a 7th turn in the game as long as you possibly can. In fact, for those who are unaware, in the beta, Magic worked on 6 and they had to nerf her so that you couldn't just unilaterally add a turn to the game because it was so strong to hide that information. And it is still stronger to keep her to later because it gives your opponents less time to figure out what they're supposed to be doing about it. If you play a limbo, if you play Magic on 3 and they see the limbo the whole time, they're sitting there looking at their Nico and being like, oh, maybe I won't play this. I'll hold it for the location destruction, right? Like, that kind of stuff really does matter. So play a lot of Magics on 5 when you play this list. I didn't know which Cerebro list to put on here. My instinct is that the C6 one is my favorite right now, but I think you could make a pretty coherent argument for C3. I know Unhelpful Yoda's been messing around with C3, of course, but to me, what sets C6 apart is that it is a lot more consistent at getting to Cerebro. So you're gonna feel a lot less like you didn't draw the card that makes the deck function. Now, in order to acquire this consistency, the inclusion of Crystal and Malekith and Grandmaster, you do give up, by being a 6-based deck, you do give up a little bit on comboing out with your Cerebro a lot of the time. Like, you have Moonstone, but you don't have like multiple ways to do it like some of the other lists do. You also can give up on having good enough early game plays. And finally, I think you give up on having both Scarlet Witch and Luke Cage. And that is something that hurts. Last up, one of the most fun decks in the game, the modern incarnation of the Season Passler, the Agamotto list with Wong in it, is just doing a lot of fun, powerful things. This is a list that I think you play if you're one of those people who's like, oh man, Marvel Snap is really samey. I would like to do something that I've never done before. This is probably the list that you're going to play. It is so good at generating incredibly weird and powerful game states that zero other decks in Marvel Snap have ever seriously generated. Cosmo is a card that is quite good against you if you are a Wong deck, but there aren't nearly as many Cosmos as we've seen in previous metagames where that guy has been the only card that matters. This is a deck that I think that you should play if you are someone who maybe is getting a little bit jaded with the state of Marvel Snap, because it's definitely powerful. Lord knows I've lost many times to KM Worst on this deck. It's a strong, powerful, straightforward deck that tickles your brain in ways that I don't think many other decks in Marvel Snap have the ability to do. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I've been KMBest. You've been phenomenal, and I will see you in the next one.